Negative thoughts are poison, they rot. Head full of flies, so here come the clouds. They'll never stop unless I can swap all the bad for the good in my head when I'm lost. Yeah, so I'ma fake it till I make it. Positive thoughts are overtaken, I got patience. One day at a time is how you operate a cadence. Afloat, you grow, you show yourself a foundation. Stay away from all the shit that causes temptation. I know that I like to do it cause of sensation. I live my life in my head like a narration. Don't expect greatness, do my best, man, I'll take it. Wake up, today's gonna be a good
Los
day.
invito a pasar a la sala, tenemos muchísimo más para reflexionar, para intercambiar ideas, así que por favor, en cuanto puedan entrar, ya empezamos con el segundo bloque que viene muy interesante, tanto por los expertos y las autoridades que lo integran, como por los puntos de vista que se van a intercambiar aquí. Así que por favor les agradecemos ya entrar a la sala, comenzamos inmediatamente con la segunda parte de este evento. Les agradecemos entonces que vayan ingresando. Empezamos en 1 minuto y en esto voy a ser muy severa porque tenemos una agenda con muchísimo para compartir, así que es importante que mantengamos los tiempos y también por respeto a todos nuestros expositores de altísimo nivel. Bueno, vamos a empezar entonces con esta segunda parte de la mañana. Bienvenidos nuevamente al lanzamiento global del informe GEM 2023.
The GEM 2023 report on technology in education. As we saw in the first block, there's lots of challenges ahead. And of course, what has happened in the last years. Thank you, everyone. Sorry, I'm going to interrupt for one moment. Remember that we're also live via streaming and that people who are watching around the world are expecting the beginning of this second part. So what has happened in the last years with technology? Technology has had an exponential growth from all points of view. But technology that refers to information and also the one referring to communication. And this has transformed much faster than what education has been able to transform, as the experts well said today, earlier. There were some juncture issues that have to do with this expansion of technology. Of course, the COVID-19 pandemic, more recently, everything that has to do with the expansion of generative artificial intelligence. And this has really generated a revolution that really affects education. And as the authorities and experts have said, the ones who have told us so far about the report, this has its good part, but it also has a negative part that we need to know how to evaluate. So this is what we're going to be talking about in the second part of the event. The GEM report, as you well know, asked for a debate on technologies of education and wants that debate to be centered specifically in education. Education is what goes first. And the 3 axes of debate that the report proposes are, firstly, equity and inclusion. How can education become the great equalizer, the thing that equals? And this is something that we're going to be talking about. The second one is quality, how it can help students not just acquire knowledge, but also make them become agents of change. And the third key of all of this is, of course, efficiency. How can efficiency balance education that is individualized and the needs for socialization? So these are not small but huge challenges that we have ahead of us, but the important thing is that they are being considered and being discussed, and there are solutions and tools to reach a good end. Of course, all the speakers are reflecting about this. We now are going to have a panel with 10 ministers of Latin America and Africa and a group of international experts who are going to talk about these challenges. But to begin with the second block of the global launch of the 2023 GEM report, I'm going to invite the Minister of Education and Culture of Uruguay, Silveira, to come on stage, and also Stefania Giannini, the General Subdirector of Education of UNESCO, so that they can share some words with us, and we can begin this second block and then come to the panel that I was talking about in the beginning.
Cuando hace poco más de un siglo se inventó la electricidad y se difundió la electricidad.
About a century ago, electricity was invented and it was disseminated, and there was a huge wave around the world of optimism regarding electricity being able to solve a huge part of the problems of humanity. And it was that way, effectively, it was so. Electricity improved the quality of life of a huge amount of people. Electricity had hugely positive impacts on the productive life, communications. But it's also true that there started to be deaths due to electrocution that before didn't exist, except perhaps if you get struck by lightning. There were environmental issues linked to how the energy, electrical energy, is generated. There were equity issues regarding where distribution networks reach and what's the impact of that on the lives of people. Not so long ago, with the invention of the cars, the same thing happened. It was an instrument that was thought that was going to really create a revolution in the ways of living, and that effectively happened, and wonderful things happened. People were able to travel distances faster, families were able to meet. They were able to transfer people who needed urgent medical care faster. And there were really a lot of benefits that we still take advantage of today, but it's also true that we started to have traffic jams, road accidents with really a fatality that we didn't have before, and environmental issues related to pollution. So it seems to be something that is a constant in history. Once when we get a technology that is innovative and has a rupture element, we put a lot of expectations into what are the solutions that is going to bring. And with time, we discover that those benefits do exist, but there are also risks, there are also costs. There's also new issues that we need to manage. And so we're sort of living that with the new technologies that have invaded us in the last few years, which have generated a huge wave of optimism and expectations. And now, as the report shows, we are seeing that a good part of that is true, but it's also true that that birth of new technologies comes with challenges, issues, risks of inequality that we need to take care of. We are not so naive now in terms of these new technologies, and that is good. That makes us more capable of reflecting and more capable of finding solutions to real issues, some of which didn't exist before and exist now. I want to welcome this wonderful panel of ministers of education in the region that we have. It's an honor to have you all here in Montevideo, and those who are speaking from further away, it's an honor to have you on screen, and we hope we can learn a lot from all of you. Thank you very much.
Señor Ministro, sorry for taking the floor twice in a few minutes. Just arrived, but I think it's the last in opening session at least. Well, I was thinking, listening to your inspiring points, that my generation actually already lived at least 3 big revolutions when it comes to technology. The beginning of the 90s, internet. The internet came up and changed positively, I would say, our lives as researchers, as I'm a university professor by job, so the way we are working and we were communicating. The second big jump to the future was the use of smartphones and having, the small computer at hand and carrying on all our data and also using it for working and communicating once again, not only as a phone. And the third revolution, which is actually what we are living now, AI, artificial intelligence, and especially, maybe the fourth now, just arrived or in the process, in the making, generative AI. So large language models, which can apparently replicate, hackering, somebody just said, our faculty of language and our cognitive system as human beings. So all of this is about the complexity we are living. I don't think that technology could be whatever we think it is, for the best, for the worst, out of the future. And especially when it comes to education, I don't think that technology could not be part of the future. So maybe just to provoke some questions for our distinguished and esteemed ministers from the South, in this, but I think they are global questions. I would say that based on the report, the first question I wish to put, quoting the report, are we all as a global community and as local decision makers, that's what ministers actually are for their communities at national level and local level, are we instinctively investing in technology, or are we making sure that it's actually going to improve learning? That's the very first question, I think, that can be taken as a provocation somehow, but also as a guideline principle to move to the future. As I mentioned already, the report presents a compass for global standards based on the 4 principles: appropriateness, equity, evidence-based solutions, and sustainability. So my second question for honorable ministers who will take the floor after us is, are these global standards fitting to your purpose? Do they meet your students, your teachers, your community expectations, or you need a different approach? And that's the role of thinking globally, but doing locally, acting locally, as you repeatedly mentioned also in our previous discussion, Mr. Minister. And another point is about warning, very much. I think it's a duty of UNESCO, and it's important that also these reports can give the global community a real message of warning about the risks and the challenges that technology can bring if it's not wisely used for the purpose of education. And on this side, I think that the important contribution of this report, we can find there the real difference that education, the evidence that the technology can do in education between inclusion and exclusion, between an isolated digital experience or a collaborative knowledge journey. So the approach can really make the difference and can really dramatically change the results and the learning outcomes. But the report also highlights that decision-making on what technology to invest in are often taken not wisely. And I think that from a ministerial point of view, it's very much important that you have a candid conversation and you give an answer to this question mark. Are we taking wise decision when it comes to ban smartphones, for instance, from the classroom and or for the school? Are we taking wise decision when we are not investing appropriately in teachers' training to be teachers ready in the classroom to use technology for the best of learners? And all these other dimensions. So I do believe that if we can position tech as a tool to use on our terms, as I said before, we can really make the best of the principle of transformation, which is still our common mission, going back to the commitment that we all together took last year in New York. Thank you very much, and looking forward to hear your position and inspiring vision, I'm sure.
Muchísimas gracias. Gracias, ministro. Gracias, Stefania.
Thank you very much, Minister. Thank you very much, Stefania. As you said before, we have the panel for Latin America with a series of experts that are going to start discussing and reflecting on the points that the Minister has already mentioned, as well as Stefania. So I would like to invite, please, Leandro Folgar, who is going to be moderating this panel. He's the president of Ceibal's Foundation and Ceibal as well. In this panel, we will also have Jaime Perczyk, the Minister of Education from Argentina, Camilo Sobreira from Santana, Minister of Education from Brazil, María Brown, Minister of Education from Ecuador, Esponda, Minister of Education from Honduras, Pablo da Silveira, our Ministry of Education and Culture. So we will all invite you, please, those who are present here today in the room, please come to the stage. And we will also have Antonio Avila Lavanal, Minister of Education from Chile. Each one of them are going to be sharing their point of view, and some of them who are not present here today are going to be sharing their perspective and experience using a video. So please be welcome. And we will start with the first panel of the second block in this morning.
Muchas gracias por estar aquí nuevamente. Luego las palabras de apertura para darle paso a este panel. Creo que queda en la mañana bastante establecido que el desafío hacia adelante es grande, pero no esperábamos menos que eso. Entendemos que el advenimiento de la tecnología aplicada intencionalmente para educación tendrá sus desafíos y sus problemas, y que cada uno de los países tienen sus contextos para poder aprovecharlo de una manera o de otra para sus comunidades. Tal vez hacer énfasis en 3 aportes del reporte. Primero, que traen un poco la evidencia sobre el impacto de la tecnología. Primero,
and one of them has to do with the advance of technology. This report emphasizes that the poorest and most vulnerable population doesn't have the chance of benefiting from technology. Of course, in each country, this will have a different context. Some of the technologies are better in improving some methods for learning. This has been a huge finding during the pandemic, that the National Institution for Education Evaluation, whose president is present here today, they found in one of their assessments a very big correlation in the use of platforms that Ceibal has during the pandemic with the results, the learning results in maths and languages. It was the first time we noticed this effect, and we were really looking forward to this. On the other hand, the short and long-term costs can be underestimated when we deploy digital technologies. These are 3 inputs that we can see in the report. So the most vulnerable portion of our population has no access to this technology. And then also, as I mentioned, the cost that may be underestimated. So considering this input, how can we make progress in the region in making programs or policies that are based in evidence, not leaving anyone behind, and having a real impact in the learning process? We will start with Jaime, Perczyk, Minister of Education from Argentina. Thank you. I would like to thank once again UNESCO and the Minister of Education of Uruguay in the Oriental Republic of Uruguay for this invitation, for having us here today to discuss and debate on these important topics. We really enjoy these meetings, and it is so nice to have this presentation in the Southern Cone, in a country that is a brother country for us. So it is also important that the first part of this report is in our language, right? So I think that is quite remarkable. Thank you for that, and thank you again for the Minister, for UNESCO's team, and thank you as well to Ceibal's Foundation. This report presents some very important topics to think now and to think about what we expect to happen. There is an intersection with these three affirmations, these three statements that you just said. The funding for education, that is maybe the discussion that countries like ours have because we're facing a lot of needs, which also has a second condition, which is lack of inequality when it comes to funding. This is something that was already mentioned in the previous panel, right? The preoccupation, the worry, the concern that we have for education, which is also reflected in our budgets, and how to train the trainers, how to connect the schools network, in our case, 60,000 schools. This requires a permanent investment, apart from the initial one, and this, of course, has to do with funding for education.
Well, this fourth includes including technology in education, and that is education financing, that is political decisions, knowing how to do it, and educational financing. The second idea is that the access doesn't guarantee learning. It's not abstract. The investment in technology is not abstract. It is a part of what we all think is going to favor better learnings and more equality, but the governments, schools, they have to do something else at the same time. The guarantee of basic learnings of language and math are fundamental conditions in order to move forward in other learnings. And the report talks about reviewing curricular framework, but we think that we have to incorporate programming at some point in the education level, probably in secondary school, but it's not magical. In order to ensure that you need to know language, you need to know math, and you need to know that right, and that is something the school has to ensure. And this technology should not compete, therefore, with other technologies that the schools have already incorporated and that have sufficient evidence which show their success, such as books. So we need to make sure, in conditions of huge inequality, that there are books for everyone and the incorporation of technology for everyone as well. The incorporation of technology in the 3 or 4 dimensions that were talked about here. So providing devices, connection, providing different portals, resources, and training of teachers. And that's something that we need to ensure. At the same time, we make sure that all the children go to school. Remember that a year ago, we were talking about how to recover those children that the pandemic had left aside from school, and not everywhere that all the kids get back to school, and that is something that we need to be worried about, that we need to take care of. Everyone has to go to school and learn what they have to learn, and everyone has to be able to incorporate the learnings that technology is going to be a tool to provide. Technology is going to allow our students to be critical, not to consume what they don't want to consume, to be able to produce And that's where programming comes in. That's the idea. And this would be in primary school, secondary school, but also in higher levels. Technology has been incorporated more easily in higher levels, but that does not end there. It's a marathon and it continues. We had a big investment in secondary school, university, but it's never enough because the race continues. Thank you very much, Mr. Effectively, yes, sometimes we forget that just a year and a half ago we came back to the classrooms in a normal way. The effects of the pandemic are still present in absolutely all the countries of the planet. I also want to welcome the Minister of Education of Brazil, Camilo Sobreira Santana, for him to share his contributions. I think that we need more evidence and more studies in order to show the programs, the models that have been implemented in some states and countries in order to serve as examples for everyone around the world. The more evidence of use of technology there is, the greatest evidence of the use of technology in education was the pandemic, but there are other experiences. Technology gave access to people who lived in remote areas. That's the experience of China shown by UNESCO, people who live in rural areas and who now have access to information. I was the governor of the state in the northeast of Brazil, and during the pandemic, I decided to hand out tablets with connection chips for all the students of primary school of my state, of a city of 100,000 inhabitants, and that became a state policy. Students start the first year of secondary school, and as something to foster the staying in school, they can take the tablet home, and we are evaluating whether that was a good policy or not, because we need to have some sort of control of the use of technological tool. That can be done in school, but not outside school. We know, however, that there is no going back in the use of technology for all the purposes, and in education, the minister said that it's an evolution in our society, and young people want to have access to the internet, devices, communication, the virtual world. Of course, Minister of Argentina said something fundamental, which is that we live in an unequal world. There are different realities in terms of education, culture around the world. And how do we guarantee that that technology is used adequately to improve the quality of learning of our children and young people? It's not going to replace a teacher. That technology won't replace them. It's just going to be a tool that is going to add the possibility of attracting young people, students, in order to improve the quality of their learning. We need to begin with basic topics. As said before, we have to invest. It's necessary to guarantee that all the schools are connected, that they have computers in order to make research. I'm not talking about a pedagogical platform. We need to talk more about that and construct models in that sense, but I'm talking about a minimal access for a research that a teacher, a student has to carry out, or maybe a teacher has to investigate in order to prepare their classes. We know that lots of young people around the world don't have access yet, and so the minimum that we have to guarantee is a policy that we try to strengthen in Brazil, which is that all public schools in Brazil need to have access to connection in order to show a video, to use broadband, and from there, the training of teachers have to be adapted to the new technologies. Our teachers oftentimes are not prepared, and we need to prepare them. It's important, as I said before, the regulation of use, the control of the use, as the minister said, the technological advances allow for positive things, but also negative things. We are subject to that. But what we want is for students and teachers to use those tools with pedagogical aims in order to improve the learning, trying to bring creativity into schools. This is fundamental. I see that I don't have much time, and so I would like to take the chance before finishing to propose something. We could think perhaps UNESCO could help gather the countries around the world, and we could think about a way to create tools to get access to all the schools of the world. If we could have a virtual library where all the schools could access in different languages, because there's people who can't even access a book. It's the reality of many young people and children around the world. And so how can we have tools or policies that are global? Because we talk a lot about globalization, but how can we give access to poor countries, or people who need more access to those tools? And so creating a virtual library that is worldwide and which all the schools around the world could access in different languages, I think that would be a practical way of showing the importance of globalization around the world. Thank you very much. Without a doubt, yes. First, I would like to thank you because I was able to see the implementation of your policy in the state of Ceará, if I'm not mistaken. And the other thing is that I think is important about your message is that in Uruguay, regarding devices, just to give you an example, in the most vulnerable socioeconomic levels, 47% of those homes, the only device that they have access to is the device that is handed out by Ceibal to the students in the schools. And it's a device that is used for many more things in that home, and which extends the classroom in a way, the borders of the classroom. And in those, the more favored areas, it's only a reality for 3 or 4% of the students because they have other devices as well. So without a doubt, policies and equality of access are very important, and I thank you very much for your contributions. I would now like to move on to María Brown, Minister of Education of Ecuador, to tell us, and I repeat the question, how can we move forward in the region in policies and programs that are evidence-based, which don't leave behind those who are most marginalized and which have real results in the results of learning? Thank you very much. And I think that if we build on the ideas that we already exchanged in this space and the results of the report, I think that it's important to talk about the diagnosis in the elaboration of public policies based on evidence, which should be the way of always making public policy. It's not always the case in all countries and all contexts. And I think that at least in our region, we have moved forward quite a bit in information collection, and it was said in the previous panel, but not enough in the processing of that information and the use of that information when making decisions that have to do with integral public policy. And so one of the decisions has to do with how can we democratize access to the results of the evaluation, both the diagnosis and the continuous ones that we have with public policies and the level of learning of our students. And there as well, I think that the role of technology in education has to be evaluated, how we can present the data in a friendly way that can be consumed not just by those who make the public policies, but also by everyone who should participate in the process of elaboration of public policy. So students, teachers, citizens, how we present the data of investment, of learning results in the standardized tests that most of our countries go through, how we present our priorities with evidence that show the effect or the impact of public policies that we have already adopted in the past in order to be able to correct those public policies, and also to define what are our priorities. After evidence, we also have the definition of what are the country objectives in a sort of umbrella way. Something that was mentioned by the minister and you as well. You said that sometimes investment is underestimated. And this happens in most social policies, and education is no exception. And the reality is that the resources that countries have are finite. And the ministries, the secretariats have the role, which is sometimes tough, of deciding what to prioritize. And I think that having a clear direction in that case of what is the issue with learning and the challenges of the system, but also what are the possible programs, plans, and projects that are going to be prioritized is fundamental. And I think that the reflection in terms of the transformation of education and having a transforming education that we've had in the countries show us some keys that are important. We've talked about the importance of recovering lessons learned, and within that to try to recover foundational learnings. And we see that technology and the use of technology is more used by people who have, by students who have a higher level of alphabetization, but I would also think about it the other way around. How can we use technology to improve the foundation learnings? And perhaps instead of focusing on the technological development of open resources that are also free, of course, and will help us have a bank of information. This is something that UNESCO has worked on in resources and Creative Commons. How can we also focus on the use and development of technologies in those areas that we want to focus as the areas where we need to recover learnings in most areas of foundational learnings and incorporate the topics of citizenship, wellness, development of social and emotional tools that we've had to set in the agendas of the countries and how we use technology for that. And I think that there is a huge challenge in that sense, but also many lessons and opportunities which have been created in different parts of the world. And the use of technology as well, I think that it has to be seen not just to democratize access to information in the studies, but also to work in the level of learnings acquisition of the students, but also in school management. This is something that was mentioned in the previous panel, and I think that it's essential. Minister Senghe mentioned it in Sierra Leone as one of the main concerns and priorities, the incorporation of technology, that the management of teachers is made easier with incorporating programs and educational resources which support the educational management, school management. And this helps make democratization in processes such as co-living codes. And I think that this is reflected in the reports, but we need to look at them in different ways and to have an umbrella which is the guide of what we need to do this for, what we want to achieve with this, what is a priority for each country, and do this in a democratic way and prioritizing investment in the communities which are most vulnerable. For that gap that exists that the minister was talking about and highlighting can be reduced when we focus on the populations that are behind. Thank you very much, Minister. In the beginning, you talked about definitely. You talked about evidence that is available, and in Ceibal, when we started to deploy technologies, we realized that there was a sub-use of technologies by girls, and we developed, and I invite you to take a look at that. We developed a publication of indicators and metrics of incorporation of technologies with a perspective of girls in STEM. And we realized that not all girls were using technologies in the same way, not all of them were participating in the teams in the same way. And we were able to put some information systems at the service of monitoring that intentionally. And that's just something that I wanted to add. I will now have the Minister of Education of Honduras, Daniel Esponda, for him to provide his perspective.
Thank you so much. It's been a true pleasure to be invited to be here today. Thank you so much. Ceibal Foundation for us has been very helpful. We have a city that is called Ceibal, which was a reference for seamen and for us in technology in the world. And here in particular, Ceibal is this point of reference to know what's the right path. In our country, pandemic really struck us, as many countries, right? And the pandemic here came to show us serious challenges that we were lagging. In the case of technologies for education, our country is a country that has the lowest connectivity indicators and where we use a lower amount of data for educational purposes. So we have a population that has intelligent gadgets. Almost 90% of the population has access to technological devices, but we don't have enough research. We run minimal surveys, like 4%, and this shows to us that technology is also like the hammer, right, of an Iron Man, or a very important tool for a carpenter. So this is something that has to be really taken care of, and we have to emphasize this importance in the report. When it comes to the enrollment and the behavior of the enrollment, it was facing a free fall in 2020, and in 2021 we were able to revert that drop, and this year in 2023, with quite modest data, we were able to reverse this trend. And we saw how teachers reinvented themselves in this process where the enrollment fell. So it is very important for us to re-educate ourselves and use new technological tools. Sometimes when it comes to have meeting rooms or any kind of messaging tools. So this is, for us, it was a bit traumatic, to be honest. Now that we're back in presence and we are teaching in classroom, the use of these technologies is very, very important. They are a tool. We are aware that the books, text will never be replaced. And the same way in which we have been used and we have been modifying the use of whiteboards in the classroom, whether you're using chalk or whether you're using an electronic panel, it is important to continue to provide the right training to our educators. And this is a medium and not an end. So in order to construct more inclusive schools, we are struggling because we have been seeing education as an aid and also as a privilege, and the same can be applied to technologies. For us, it's just a piece of equipment that is delivered, but for other people, this is a true privilege. So we need to break this barrier and have mechanisms in place so people understand that education is a right, it's not a privilege. And technology is the same. It is not a privilege. It is a right, and it is a right for each one of us. In Honduras, we are conducting a very interesting exercise in our country. We never have a policy for training teachers, which is bilingual, but now we have 5 normal schools which are preparing preschool and primary education as bilingual teachers. And along with this, they are being trained in the use of technologies. We're using a project plan 365 that is enabling us to use these technologies as the main tool. And the objective number 4 for our plan is digital capabilities, how we can use this, and I am also joining Mrs. Brown's presentation in saying that technology improves the use of the investments, and this should be ease. This should be a way for us to facilitate the procurement process. We need to have access to real-time data so we can renew our educational systems to guarantee this equality. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Un reconocimiento para el trabajo que se viene haciendo con Fundación en el área de contenidos educativos. Realmente se nota la determinación.
Thank you so much for your input. I understand that you're quite determined in advancing and making progress in this sense. So now, just to finalize our panel, I would like now give the floor to the minister that is local here. So,
el ministro de Uruguay, Pablo da Silveira.
Pablo da Silveira, our Minister of Education and Culture. I will try to concentrate in two specific items that Leandro mentioned, the importance of generating evidence and the importance of relating this in the prioritization of the most vulnerable sectors. As you know, here we have very intimidating screens who are telling us how long we have left to speak. I already spent like 7 seconds telling you my short introduction, so I will go straight to the point. I would like to start by something that may seem quite obvious, but has many consequences. We were talking in general about education, technology, and the introduction of technology within educational contexts. But to be honest, behind this handling of nouns in plural, education, technology, there are many ways in which we can do this. There are many ways to put this intention into the practice. And what we are learning so far is that the devil is always in the details, so the success or failure are always present in the decision-making process regarding which technologies, which technological tools we are choosing and how we use them, with which approach. So I think that this report can be seen in different ways. We should start from a more broader approach and go more into details regarding the percentage of connectivity rates. This is more like going into the more granular aspects. Just to give you some examples, analyze whether it is important. Of course, it is important for students to receive computers or gadgets. We can discuss. But it's important to discuss which gadgets. At Ceibal, we have evidence that in certain age groups, distributing tablets has no effect in education for educational purposes. What you need to distribute are Ceibalitas or notebooks. And this is a problem because it is cheaper. It is cheaper for us to distribute tablets. So if I am more efficient, I distribute tablets, I can reach more people, I can reach more educational centers, and I am also saving money because the age group to which I'm sending, but this doesn't make any sense because the age group to which I am sending these tablets that are cheaper, they are not going to make the most of it. It's not beneficial for their educational purposes. So we need to take into consideration which gadgets for which purposes. We were able to generate evidence at Ceibal saying that when the teacher uses gadgets in the classroom or devices, relating them and fusing them into their program, the use of these devices increases by the students, even at home. It is not the same to say, okay, I will give you this device and use it as you wish, or if you relate this into a specific learning project. So we need platforms, we need different kinds of tools, because none of them are the same. And the way we choose these kinds of devices, typically platforms I'm talking about, or the decision of what I'm going to be procuring or how I'm going to be developing the software. This is very, very important. I can have a lot of devices distributed, many teachers that are fully committed to their work, but if I make the wrong choice in the platforms that I make available to teachers, then the results can be very, very bad. So it is not the same to do this once the teachers have received training, so they are already familiar with the tools available and with the general principles, or just distribute them without paying attention to this training that we need to provide to teachers. So this is also an important thing that we need to take into consideration. It is not the same, and again, we have generated evidence in this sense to work with individual teachers or to work with educational communities, including their managing bodies. According to our case, the work that we have conducted with individual teachers is less productive and has less impacts in the education compared to when you work with the community as a whole and when you involve their management. Because if I am the headmister or the headmistress of a school and I am involved in this, and I will be able to have better results. UNESCO knows this. This is highly probable. So the results are going to be impacted when we are all committed. So the challenge that we face from now on, and I think that this is a very good starting point, we need to open the black box, take a look at what we're doing, and do this in a very discriminatory way, break down all the information, and share the experiences of what other countries are doing within other contexts as well.
Muchas gracias, Ministro da Silveira. En parte de su alocución, el ministro hablaba.
Thank you so much, Minister da Silveira. You were talking about personalization to give each one of the students what they need. So Giannini presented some questions regarding AI and the challenges that it poses, but this is a very big promise of AI to provide technological solutions enabling higher levels of personalization and customization for the reality of each student. So maybe there we have room for better news in the future. Our minister also showed to you how this constant race looks like here in Uruguay. And the last thing we will do in this panel is to share with you the video from Antonio Avila Lavanal, Minister of Education in Chile. Hello, I am Antonio Avila. The positions that we are taking today are going to have a huge impact in the future. The crisis provoked by the pandemic, global warming, technology make us rethink our future. In Chile, since last year, we have been promoting a restructuring of educational system in order to close the gap caused by the pandemic, strengthening these relations. In order to make progress, we have related the educational programs that we are promoting to for the use of technology in the classroom. And an example of this is that we have a plan which transformational structure tries to close the gap, to bridge the gap, so we can develop further capacities for the use of technology. We have already 9,285 educational centers which are connected to the internet with the right pathways. We also have more than 11,000 centers interconnected. The advance of the use and the access of technology enable us to use this as a support tool. This is very important for the educational communities through the teaching of and learning, maths and languages, which also help our teachers to innovate in their strategies. As we can see, according to our experience, digital technologies can be a big tool in order to bridge the gap, but this is only possible if we are able to ensure equality in their access. From Chile, I would like to say a warm thank you to everybody.
Bueno, agradecemos a Marco Antonio y a todos los ministros por
Thank you so much, Marco Antonio. Thank you as well to all ministers for participating in this panel. Thank you so much, and thank you everybody for being here today. It will be the end of this panel. Thank you everybody, and thank you for Mr. Delgados, President of Ceibal and Ceibal Foundation, and we will continue to exchange our lessons learned. There's going to be a video regarding Africa. We're going to be sharing this video with them later on, so we can exchange ideas on this video after the lunch break. We will also like to invite our second panel in the morning. That is going to be moderated by Manos Antoninis, who is the director of these educational systems from UNESCO. Manos is going to now be here with us. And I would like to invite also Wayne Horse, Renato Perti, coordinator of UNESCO's for hybrid education from the Catholic University of Uruguay. Silvia Montoya, director of the Statistic Institute at UNESCO, and David Hollow, director of IHAB.
Ya también reflexionando sobre las anteriores reflexiones de la mañana.
So we would like to now continue our reflection, and Manos is going to be then guiding us through this process.
Thank you very much. And we're keeping you from lunch, so we'll try to be efficient, but just to summarize a few words, we heard the concerns in the previous panel of the ministers that you all have to open the caja negra, as you call it, and I think that is perhaps the most encouraging lesson we can draw, because really we should be asking the questions. That's exactly what we are being called to do, and sometimes we forget. But there are many, many, many more questions when it comes to artificial intelligence, and it is inevitable that we would include it in this program. Stefania recently published her ideas about the challenges that are facing us following a very, very important engagement of ministers from all over the world that UNESCO organized to bring these different experiences on the table and carve a way ahead. So we have our experts that were already introduced to share their thoughts on how can education systems continue to place learning at the center in a context where breakthroughs in artificial intelligence have increased the power of education technology tools, leading to speculations that technology could even supplant human interaction. So I would like to invite our expert now to share their thoughts. Wayne Holmes, Associate Professor in the University College London Knowledge Lab, and Renato Perti, Senior Policy Expert at the International Bureau of Education of UNESCO, to start by responding to the first question in turn. Which are the implications for education from the rise of artificial intelligence in education? Which advice would you give to policymakers to ensure that learners and teachers remain at the center of discussions on artificial intelligence in education? Wayne.
Well, thank you very much. Before I answer the question directly, I just want to say how excited I am to be here, and thank you for the invitation. But the reason I'm really excited is because this is a lonely path that I've been treading for a long time. And now I finally have the evidence to show. And so I'm really grateful for the report. And I will be sharing it with my students, and I'll be referencing it for months to come, I'm absolutely certain. I think the issue about AI in education is, one of the reasons we're talking about it more these days is because of generative AI. But AI in education has been researched for at least 50 years. The problem is that research has really been focusing on replacing human functions. So the idea is, can we develop technologies that will do the job of a teacher? Well, I have to tell you now that no, it can't. There is no technology, there's no AI system available today that's anywhere near as skilled or intelligent or understands enough as a human teacher. But this is one of the problems that we do have to deal with. And it raises several issues, and I might make myself unpopular with this next comment, or more unpopular. One of the issues that we talk about, or we hear talked about a lot, is the notion of personalization. And the idea is that, every student should have their own opportunity to learn at their own speed, etc. But the problem with this is it's an imposition from a Silicon Valley mindset. And it actually undermines the whole collaborative and social aspects of teaching and learning. For me, I've been in classrooms where we have 30 students, each with their own individual computer, focused, and ignoring the students to their left and their right, and ignoring the teacher. This isn't what education's about. There are some places where these technologies can be useful, but that's not where it is. And one of the problems with lots of the technologies, lots of the artificial intelligence that we currently have, is that, to use a phrase, they perpetuate poor pedagogic practices, by which I mean they implement particular approaches to teaching and learning that we know as educators are not that successful, but they're relatively easy to automate. So we need to question these approaches as well. Because the reality is that education is about more than improving students' abilities to take tests. It's about becoming a social person. It's about developing as individuals so that we can make useful contributions to society. And these things are just not touched in any way, shape or other by the educational technologies, particularly the AI tools. So I think what we have to be very careful about is thinking about, well, what ways can we be using these tools? And there's another word I have heard a lot today already which makes me smile, and that's the word solution. Because I simply don't believe that these things are solutions. The solutions to the education problems that we have are people, and people using tools. And the reality is that artificial intelligence, some aspects of it, could function as useful tools, so long as they're being used by educators and other stakeholders in ways that build upon what we know.
Thank you very much, Wayne. And I think you hit it on the nail. Let's have Renato's views on this very same question.
Muchas gracias por esta posibilidad. Yo creo que estamos ante un cambio civilizatorio. Y en realidad lo tenemos que repensar la inteligencia artificial como una herramienta para ese cambio.
Artificial intelligence as a tool for that civilization change. It's not just an issue of incorporating digital technologies in education. It's much deeper because it implies a change in the ways of living in society and relating to each other. We have identified 8 different things to talk about this. There's the political aspect. This implicates an elevation of politics and public policies to transform this into a democratization of education. Then there's the democratic one, how artificial intelligence is going to be used to establish democracy as it should be, with an accent in the student and the creative thought and autonomous thought of the student, which is fundamental. As Stefania said, these days, language is important. It's fundamental, and it's fundamental to strengthen human language and to make alphabetization transversal, this that the report says, and it's important to not be dominated by what a linguist who is really well known, Emily Bender, what she calls things that produce texts without understanding what they're saying. So repeating like parrots is what she calls it. And we need to really strengthen human cognitive abilities. The third thing that we consider important is public policies. This implies strong public policies, such as the case of Ceibal in Uruguay. It implies placing at the discussion what UNESCO has been insisting on, which is the right to free connectivity and education. If this means resources, platforms, strategies, it implies also not making machines responsible of the creations of humans. These are moral zombies. The machines are moral zombies. We, the humans, are responsible, and we direction artificial intelligence. The fourth is the curricular pedagogical aspect. I think that the report could go deeper into hybrid models of integration and virtuality. It's possible to personalize education in collective environments. This is not opposite to collective environments. We can work in collective environments of learning perfectly well. What has happened is that there's been no personalization in education. What has happened is that there's been individualization of education, which is really different. You can personalize pedagogy, you can have a diverse array of pedagogies, strategies, and you can have much more diverse curriculums. Then we have more and better learning, and I think the proposal of the Ministry of Brazil is fundamental, which is creating an agency of curriculum in Latin America and Africa, a way to put in common different resources. UNESCO is working on this, and it's very important to circulate knowledge, and for students in any place of Latin America or Africa to have access to resources in order to make a difference in learning. We think that the massive use of modules of learning, as Stefania said today, can be a powerful tool to have better learnings. And the fifth is the aspect of sustainable world. We could think that the artificial intelligence could strengthen local knowledge. It could put into dialogue what UNESCO said, which is knowledge commons. We could put in dialogue the different regional worldwide dialogues in order to talk about sustainability. The other aspect is comprehension of topics. Learning data analytics was mentioned today, and this is a fundamental tool to understand the complexity of education topics. As Silvia will probably say, we have to make a lot of reference to the generation, triangulation, and analysis of data to try to go deeper into the topics. As a philosopher, French philosopher and educator said, the problem is not disciplines, it's the topics, and we need to move the disciplines in order to understand the topics. And then lastly, the aspect of strategic investment, and we need to realize where we have to invest in artificial intelligence. Perhaps we need to invest more in, for example, primary school in printed materials as a way to reconnect them with each other and with their teachers and families. We have to see where to invest in artificial intelligence because countries have to have a clear direction for investments. Sorry, the paper fell out, but I think that these are the aspects that can help us rethink artificial intelligence. But again, the debate today is not about technologies, it's about how to create something when the human race is at risk.
Renato, and I think
thank you very much.
Both of you, both Wayne and Renato, have a little bit prepared the ground because you both touched upon data. To invite Silvia Montoya, the director of the UNESCO Institute for Statistics and our very, very, very close partner over several years, to bring her perspective on the fact that generative artificial intelligence as the latest technology to be touted as having the potential to transform education also has a potential data dimension. Could you please share your experience on that from a data perspective, given your work?
No, thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to actually share. This is about talking about data. I mean, because at the end of the day, artificial intelligence is a machine who is loaded with tons of data, and it's about prediction of that machine to a specific context, because it has a degree of imprecision in their prediction, and I think that that machine could be supervised or not in the process of learning. Many of the processes we're seeing right now when we share and we Google and we actually go into ChatGPT or BART or the other kind of devices have a lot of degree of imprecision, and then the question is to what extent we can, and what is the degree of imprecision we can afford in education, and how we can best use those engines and those technologies in terms of improving the level of learning and to be clear about what is the problem that we want to solve. And I think we have been hearing in the morning, and we just hear from Renato, a very kind of a passionate view on that matter. And I think that I would like to refer, for instance, for the case of learning assessment, that they are actually one of the tools that are not only to judge where the systems are going, but also at the level of the student and the potential to provide to the students a good context and the tool for the teacher to actually to help the student. And we can see there that there are different tasks in the process of actually assessing. There is a task of writing items that are scoring the questions and then doing the analysis and the psychometric that is going to be, at the end of the day, the analysis of the learning outcomes of the children who are, at the end of the day, the outcome of the system. So we can see that there are seriously focused research done by Cambridge Education, by CITO, by the Australian Council for Educational Research, and for many of the institutes who are investing millions of dollars in trying to see which is the precision that we have in actually in the design of those assessments. And we can see for some of the tasks that could be very good, but for some of the other tasks could be very bad also as well. I mean, you can actually give instruction to some of these engines, and you can get, in half of the cases, good kind of examples of how to evaluate the skills, but you can get also half of the instructions about doing it wrong. And we can see also that the scoring, we have a recent experience that Cambridge Assessment has done. It has loaded hundreds of thousands of samples of students' constructed response items, open-ended questions, that have been marked by humans, and still the machine is not able to score in an efficient way those answers. So at the end of the day, there is still a lot of imprecision about how to use, and to some extent, this is something that we have to be very careful, because it's different to sponsor or to do marketing using and trying to identify characteristics of the person, and it's a completely different to do prediction about the health status of a person, the learning level of the student, or even if you are flying, it's different to do the commercial strategy of an airline using artificial intelligence that try to predict if the engine is ready to fly and actually safely land the passengers in the destiny without crashing along the way. So I think that this is an important issue, and we have some experiences that are showing that in some cases still were not prepared. We know that Amazon in 2014 was detecting that they have bias in the hiring of employees because the loaded data was biased toward males, and actually they were discriminated against women. Microsoft discontinued a kind of an application in 2017 was actually loaded with hatred speech because this is what the data was loaded in the system. We also know that Facebook in 2019 actually have to review the algorithm for hiring employees because it was discriminated about women and minorities. So the challenge is how to use this tool in order to actually to make clear and to help a student and learning. And to some extent, we have to be careful that in most of the regions in the planet, and actually the most populated region, the problem that we have is that 9 out of 10 children, so almost every child, is unable to combine a few words into a sentence. So they don't have the critical thinking that is enough, and to some extent the challenge is how we can help the teachers that are teaching in that environment, how we can help the students to actually to try to use the technology in the way that is convenient to move them forward, and taking into account that the turnover to the teacher profession is around 4 or 5% each year of the teachers are new teachers. So we have to take care of the teachers who are currently teaching and try to see how we can equip and invest in a meaningful way in order to help those students and to reduce the inequity and to help the system to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Silvia. And that brings us to David. David Hollow, Research Director of the EdTech Hub, a close partner in the preparation of this report, for which we are grateful, and Verna and her team. And also, I could also add, given that this is a global event, continuing partner, there will be 2 regional editions coming out of this publication, one focusing on Southeast Asia, and the EdTech Hub will be a partner there, and another one in the Pacific over the coming 10 to 12 months. There will be 2 more publications. So in all that, we have enjoyed very much discussing with you the significance of evidence. It came very strongly from the ministers. What have you been doing on this topic, and what are the messages that you would like to share with us?
Thank you, Manos. Thank you, everybody. I think the first thing to say is that we are living in a destabilizing time when we think of all the changes that generative AI is bringing out across different sectors. That can be overwhelming, it can be exciting, and it's rightly concerning. What's happening is happening fast, and it's very significant, and it's worth our careful attention. So as Manos says, at the EdTech Hub, when we talk about EdTech, normally we are talking about things on the basis of a solid evidence base, about rigorous independent research of what works, for whom, in what context, etc. Unfortunately, with generative AI, that research base does not exist. That's okay, but that's important for us all to acknowledge, because it means that we need a dose of significant intellectual humility as we approach the conversations. We are all giving our best intelligent estimates of what the future of education in a generative AI-enabled world will look like. It means we need collective intelligence, and we need to listen to multiple perspectives. Hopefully they can help us to focus on the good and avoid the costly errors. So, how do we do that? 3 things very briefly. We need to make a concentrated effort to learn from those who are already at the leading edge of good practice. To cite a few examples, if you're looking for an introduction to how good EdTech is starting to make use of generative AI, Khan Academy is a great place to start. Khan Migo. Go and look. Half an hour, and you'll see all the ways some smart people are trying to integrate generative AI as a tutoring assistant into what is already a good platform. And then at the policy level, we have groups of people investing significant resources in thinking through what's the policy architecture that we need, with the UNESCO guidance on generative AI, and a couple of weeks ago, the Russell Group of universities in the UK as well, starting to say what are the protocols and boundaries that we need in place. Then, secondly, when we think about evidence in EdTech, there's many gaps, and as we said, there's many more gaps in the role of generative AI. So we need to build on what we already know, and that has been wonderfully highlighted in the GEM report with the compass, the questions that we need to be asking. Is this sustainable and scalable in the context? Does this align with the national curriculum? Is this appropriate and cost-effective for the context? With every new technology comes the temptation to get rid of old evidence. We need to not do that. Thirdly, we have there are a few specific priorities of things that we need to build now. We have some of the emerging protocols and priorities in place, but we do need to have technical guidance. The international community needs to come together to say, what is the best current thinking we have on how large language models can help us take forward digital personalized learning, tech-enabled teacher professional development, data for decision-making, so that we can have these norms and standards and good practices in place. And then finally, I guess to lift our eyes up slightly before lunch, I think we have a unique role as educators. Every sector is thinking about the promise of AI and how it may or may not change their work. But in education, we have a more fundamental, far-reaching objective, which is to help the next generation learn how to navigate an uncertain AI-infused world. That requires critical thinking, helping them to build critical consciousness regarding, of all the possible futures with AI, which are those which are going to lead us towards human flourishing and which are not. There are going to be many things that could be done with AI in education and elsewhere that don't lead to human flourishing. And the best thing we can do as educators is to equip the next generation of learners with the skills they need to be able to navigate that future.
Thank you very much. If I could summarize, perhaps, is to say that next time you read in the news an expert talking about AI and the future of education, check closely whether they are an education expert, because that's often missed. You really need to go to the fine print and see whether those who argue that do have an experience of a classroom and know what they're talking about. Thank you very much to our expert panels. Last applause, please, for their contributions.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, everybody, for being part of this panel. And ahora vamos a continuar.
We will now go to this first part. We will close this part of the meeting. I will ask you just a few minutes while we just reaccommodate microphones. And I would like to tell you that as soon as we finish with these closing words from the Director of Education, we will take a family picture with the authorities and the ministers, so please bear with us. And we will also ask speakers to stay with us because we will take the official picture of the event. So I will now like to invite Gonzalo Baroni, the Director, the National Educator of Education in Uruguay, Ignacio Barone. He will close this learning morning where we have access to first-hand information to the GEM report 2023. Thank you so much, Carina. Good afternoon, everybody. It is a true honor to be here, closing this panel after the authorities that spoke before me. I would like to say hello to the local ministers and authorities, to the ministers that are visiting us from abroad, to the team of Ceibal's authorities and UNESCO authorities who enabled this event to be perfect, and also thank the general audience and those following us through the streaming. This institutional framework that enables the different governments and the people that I have mentioned to reflect on the things that are happening on technologies in education. This global report, to which I would like to highlight the effort on behalf of Maros Antoninis, who have gathered the experiences throughout the world, has enabled us to have this like subtitle, a follow-up on education. Something that is very difficult sometimes to do inside the countries. So this has been a huge effort. We have witnessed through this report many ideas that are now set on paper. We have seen innovations on a topic that was growing, but now has taken a more important relevance after the pandemic. I wanted to highlight some of the things mentioned in this report, some things that many governments have already mentioned, but it continues to be a bit make a lot of noise in the public policies. Teachers cannot be replaced. There is not such issue. We will not be replacing an expert or a teacher. They will continue to be in front of a class. Technology as itself, it is not the solution. We need to take this into consideration. Sometimes companies come or governments come that in a few months, by procuring packages, they want to provide a solution to problems that are coming from the past. We need to think about the history of data and use it on the long term. Cost and efficiency should be taken into consideration for projects to be scalable and sustainable in education. The speed in which our legislation changes, specifically in the public policies, sometimes execution collapses with the bureaucracy in our countries. So I want to connect this to what happens in the LAC region and highlight that this report is being presented for the first time in a country of a Hispanic country in our region. And picking up on what it was mentioned before, I wanted to emphasize that the LAC region needs to be better known, not only because of soccer, not only because of football. We are good football players, soccer players, but we need to gain more. The world needs to know about us because of our educational programs, which enable us to have a more equitable continent. Of course, facing all the challenges that we have experienced in the past. I want to double click and click on Uruguay. We are here in an event that has been organized by our ministry, by Ceibal Foundation and UNESCO, and I wanted to highlight this state policy, Ceibal. Plan Ceibal, back then and now, is now an agency. It used to be a plan, but throughout these 16 years, different governments have passed. They were involved in different budget policies. We have made a huge progress where we were able to deliver devices, elaborate content, train the trainers. We have had ambassadors in different parts of the world, experts in logistics and technology for information, and they have faced the pandemic, a pandemic that, in the public opinion, it was thought that many things were standardized and the magic solution would come from Ceibal, where there was a false idea that by having a device at home, you would be able to keep up with the education. That public opinion, that political system that sometimes is rushed by the deadlines, didn't ask themselves some questions like, what happens with connectivity in our families? What happens with the teachers and their training on technologies? What happened to the gaps among the different quintiles in the population, whether they were all getting the same lessons, the same amount of knowledge? And asking these questions, we need to revert the trend. And Ceibal was a key player for us to have the students in the center of the discussion for education in our continent. Safety, economy, work, these are always the things that we're always discussing. But education during the pandemic was key. It was at the center of the discussion. It was discussed at families, it was discussed at the public media, private media, which was also discussed at schools in each environment and public environment. Hence, I wanted to highlight the role of students, and they are the reasons why we are here. Their voice is important, what they learn at the end of the day. This is the reason why we elaborate these reports, and this is the reason why we have authorities, and this is the reason at the end of the day why we need to continue discussing to have more and better education. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Director of Education. We had a very intense morning with lots of ideas and challenges that we now have to start to try to solve, but this is a starting point that is fundamental and really necessary. Thank you to all the speakers and participants of this morning. And as it was said before, it's an honor having been here, to be here in Montevideo to present the GEM 2023 report, but this is going to continue. At 3, we're going to be waiting for you to begin moving out of the Alliance for Digitalization in Latin America. I just ask for 2 minutes of your attention to remind all the participants that when you come tomorrow, don't forget your accreditation so that we don't have to repeat the process. I also want to remind you that the panel of Africa that they're going to participate is a pre-recorded video where authorities and ministers participate. It's going to be shown in streaming now when we finish this vlog. And I don't want to forget another detail, which is that we're going to take a picture now. First, we want to call for the present ministers and then the speakers in order to take an official picture. I will expect you at 3 o'clock, and thank you very much for being in this event that is fundamental for education.
Dear Honorable Ministers, it is an honor for me to moderate this high-level.
Vamos a sacar también una foto con los ministros y los anfitriones, así que invitamos a los anfitriones de Fundación Ceibal, de Ceibal y del Ministerio de Educación y Cultura también a integrarse a la foto. Muchas gracias a los ministros.
Dear Honorable Ministers, it is an honor for me to moderate this high-level roundtable with you.
Les agradecemos a los oradores, por favor, que suban al escenario, así sacamos la foto oficial del encuentro. Gracias a todos los oradores por participar de esta foto. Que no quede nadie afuera. Capaz que alguien, si está en el foyer y me está escuchando.
More than ever, recommendations that are based on evidence on how to use technology across education systems. Our invitation today is to discuss together the use of technology and learning for all children and all learners in Africa. Children in Africa are lagging behind in terms of learning outcomes. We know that at most 1 in 5 children of primary school age achieve minimum proficiency in reading and mathematics. But every part of the world has a major outstanding education problem to deal with. And every region, education systems around the world have often turned to technology to try to solve the most pressing issues in education. But as this year's GEM report correctly reminds us, we need to first ask ourselves what education systems we want before we turn to technology as a solution. The report provides strong arguments around the trade-offs that are inherent in the choices we need to make about the use of technology in education. And it is important that we look carefully at these trade-offs. I'm happy that we are joined today by Honorary Minister of Education and Skills of Botswana, Mr. Douglas Letsholathebe, Honorable Minister of State of Primary and Secondary Education of Rwanda, Mr. Gaspard Twafirayezu, and Honorable Minister of Education of Zambia, Mr. Douglas Siakalima. I will invite them to share with us their own country experiences in response to this specific common question for all of them. How can we promote digital education policies and programs in Africa that are based on evidence, that do not leave the most marginalized learners behind, and that can have a real impact on learning outcomes? Our honorable ministers from Latin America have already reflected upon this same question. So together through this South-to-South dialogue, we hope to be able to shed some light to the discussion around the use of technology in education with reference to Africa, using the recommendations of the 2023 GEM report as guidance. With this brief introduction, let me pass the floor to Honourable Minister Douglas Letsholathebe of Botswana to share with us his thoughts. Minister, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to share our experience in Botswana in the space of technology. Indeed, to teach or for learning to take place, we need to have the right curriculum. We need to have the good pedagogy to present that curriculum and good assessment. Now, I will concentrate mostly on the pedagogy. That's where we have used a technology to improve our teaching or learning in schools. We have looked at the way we teach students, and we realized that most of the students right now are not interested in the old way in which we teach. So we have embraced ICT in teaching and learning. And so we made sure that we concentrate on 3 or 4 major points to make sure that learning takes place effectively. Remember, our assignment is to make sure that we do not leave anyone behind. And with ICT being brought in pedagogy, could leave other people behind. So one of the first important things we made sure that we concentrated on is the issue of connectivity. Do we have the right connectivity, internet, the right speed for everybody all over the country? And this is one of the major important things we looked at. And we are right now spreading out all over the country, connecting schools with the internet. And not only schools, we have where people gather to discuss the village issues known as kotlas. We are also connecting those to internet so that students, when they are maybe over the weekend when they are not at school, they could go by next to their kotla and connect to internet. And the next thing is issues to access to the devices themselves. You can have the internet. If you do not have the devices, you may not have, you cannot connect. So we are giving out ICT gadgets to all schools. We have started off the senior secondary schools. We now move into junior secondary schools, and we'll be moving to primary schools next year. We are really careful. We know students need to learn other motor skills. So we will be careful as we go lower than in lower primary. We'll be giving them gadgets and sometimes collecting them. The other important component we are concentrating on is what we put in those gadgets, the content. Have the kids have access to the right content? So we are retooling and upskilling our teachers so that they should be ready to train a 21st century learner. The 21st century learner needs to be trained to find the content out there in the wide web. Not only that, we have retooled and trained them to develop their content so that they can be able to give it to their students. And we are also, because politicians, we looked at the policies to come out with conducive policies to protect kids against cyber crimes and others, so that the students do not end up exposing them to a lot of danger. So we are embracing technology, especially on the part of the pedagogy and assessment. We'll have some time to touch on that, but we are using ICT to improve the quality of our education in Botswana.
Thank you, Minister, for touching upon a broad range of really extremely relevant issues, and I'm happy that we'll have a chance to also come back to some additional activities that you have been carrying out. Let me turn to Honourable Minister Twafirayezu. Rwanda, which also features quite extensively in the GEM report this year, has had quite a long experience of trying to embed technology in education. Please share with us your main reflections on the experience of implementing these policies.
Thank you very much, Manos, and thank you, colleagues, for giving us an opportunity to share with you all the experience of Rwanda to leverage ICT to improve learning outcomes for our children. So, but before I do that, I would want to quickly reflect on the opportunity that the GM report is presenting to us to rethink the use of technology in education systems and at the lenses of relevance, equity, scalability, and sustainability. But also at the same time, remembering that these digital technologies are not coming to replace the human interaction, but rather we are aiming at enhancing this interaction in our education systems. In Rwanda, we are also thankful that we have been looked at in this report, and we're presented as one of the case studies in Africa. So, but allow me to draw on 5 key elements that we have prioritized as a country. And number one is the digitization of the education system. What we have done is to build systems that streamline all the workflows in our education systems value chain. We have digitized information systems from the classroom levels up to the national levels. We have also worked on different systems to allow us to increase efficiency in hiring teachers, in managing them, but also to look at how they are trained and how they are promoted. We have also, of course, been working on different systems to ensure that assessments in our classrooms are done efficiently and to ensure that the data coming from those systems can inform our policies on a national level. Of course, in addition to digitalization of the education system itself, we have also invested in building content that's aligned with the curriculum, but also content that is integrated in the teaching and learning processes. And we have been providing access to our children of digital textbooks to ensure that our students and our teachers can access those resources online. Of course, we have also been emphasizing on infrastructure development, where most of our schools have access to digital devices, be it computers, tablets. But we have also been investing a lot in network, because you can have content and devices, but you also need all our schools to be connected. And I also want to highlight that we are also beginning to build a dedicated network for our education system. And this is a network that's going to connect schools and research institutions across the country. But of course, we have also been observing, of course, disparities across our education system, and we see this in terms of access to devices and access to the resources, of course, given where the schools are located. But of course, we are working on increasing the pool of technologies that we use to connect all these schools to ensure that most of our schools have access to internet resources, but also devices. We have also built policies to ensure that as we avail online resources, we need to also ensure that they are safe for our kids to access. So this is why we have developed a child online protection policy and a data privacy policy. And this is to ensure that our kids and our teachers can access these resources online, while we also protect their safety and their privacy. But of course, when we try to expand that experience, talk about Africa in general, I think we also need to look at access of devices, because these devices are getting expensive, and this prevents us from scaling those solutions. And this is why I believe that as African educators, we should also be looking at how do we pool our purchasing capacity so that we can have a greater bargaining power when we are discussing about procurement of these devices as they get more and more expensive, and our systems of education keep growing as we get to admit more children, as we also improve our efficiency. So I think this is very important, and I would want to invite all our colleagues here to actually consider working together on a continent to ensure that our children can have better access to those devices. I thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. This is like music to my ears, because it's true. There are not that many areas of activity that countries can work together. They can learn from each other, but there are a few practical ways of collaboration, and I think the one you suggested sounds very, very promising. Let me now invite Minister Siakalima, who has also a really very ambitious vision for the education system of his country. I was pleased to listen to him last November, but I was in the context of a summit or a conference on technology in education. So it would be very interesting to hear how you envisage the incorporation of technology in your ambitious education vision. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Manos. Nice to see you once again. And good afternoon, my friend Botswana. And good afternoon, my colleague from Rwanda. Yes, the use of technology in schools is quite important for us, we believe. And I always say this, we missed the agrarian revolution first, then we missed the industrial revolution, then we shouldn't miss the technological revolution which is coming. And to leverage it with what we are doing in schools, I must confess that we have not gone wider the way Rwanda has done it. And I'm glad that my colleague was saying that we need now to start working together. We can learn from one another, but we can still work together, like my friend from Rwanda gave an example. How do we leverage in order for us to get these devices? They shouldn't be too expensive for us. I know quite all right ourselves. My government has increased the share of GDP in terms of putting resources into education. So, and most of it, we are trying now to deal with the technological world. We have already done the national ICT policy, which we are also now building other laws. We have already an act which protects the child. So within our ICT policy, there is a bigger law which protects the child, every child. We also have just passed a few laws on cyber, especially on cyber crime, in order for our children not to really to go into something and then some people start tampering with them. One issue that we have not done a lot is actually in rural Zambia, because internet is quite slow that side. And what we are trying to do is, because we are using our hydroelectricity in order for us to get electricity, in order to get connected. But thank heaven we have now a solar system, so it is working well for us. We are also trying to get e-libraries so that our kids do not need to go physically into a library to go and read. They can read online with those protections that we have already. One thing probably that has made us learn a lesson now is COVID-19. COVID-19 taught us a lot of lessons on how important technology is. Because at that time, we were shuttering schools. Although we were not certainly affected as Africa, we should never ever think that something will not come which will disturb our kids and therefore the loss in learning. So ourselves, COVID really made us a point to say that ICTs, of course, like my colleague was saying, they will not replace a human or a human being, but it will help us in terms of so many things, in terms of learning, catching up, trying to learn at home. When there is a calamity, you still have to learn. Many of our universities now are online. Even when the kids are off school, they write assessments. I mean, they write their reports and then they are sent online, and the teachers interact with them. So although we need still to do so much, but I think that we are on the right trajectory because every year, like myself, I'm receiving quite a bigger portion of the GDP in terms of budget. I think I can stop for now there.
Thank you, Minister Sekalima. I think I would like to give you the floor a second time because we do have a little bit of time left to reflect on the question because you all agreed that we need to put learners at the center. And the campaign behind this report is education technology on our terms. So I'd like you to reflect on that question. What does it mean for you to say that from your position you can help set the table? We had an example from Minister Twafirayezu on working together to set the terms, the cost terms, which can be expensive. But before I give the floor back to you, just a summary. Your interventions were really excellent because you have touched upon all of the diverse issues that the GEM report is touching. We talked about the opportunities that technology is giving us to reach disadvantaged groups. You mentioned remote libraries, for instance, in Zambia. You talked about content, the opportunity to put so much content preferably aligned to the curriculum to achieve our learning objectives. You talked about the use to develop skills to navigate the digital world. Of course, not everyone is exposed to it at the same time, but things are changing very fast and you're taking the precautions. You talk about the use of data and technology for education management through, I think, all sorts of examples, even in hiring and recruiting and managing teachers, for instance, in Rwanda. You talked about the challenges of connectivity in Botswana. You talked about the need to set devices, share them widely, but also make sure that they're both equitably distributed and appropriate, because maybe younger children need not be as much exposed to devices as older children. You talked about the need to protect them, and you also talked about the need to support teachers, a major condition for anything in technology and education to succeed. So thank you very much for these broad-ranging interventions. Let me get back to you in the same order and ask you a very brief reflection on what does it mean for you as a Minister of Education to set the terms on how technology is used for the best interests of learners. Minister Letsholathebe.
I can reflect on now, it's what I've learned, the challenges I've learned as we try to roll out ICT in schools. Like colleagues have said it, the issue of research centers and education and networks coming together to make sure that data is affordable. That's one of the things we really want to look into, to make sure that we discuss with others to find out how we can spread it out to other, not only research centers and going down to basic education. Usually the research and education networks is concentrating on universities and research centers. We need to go all the way to involve everybody. The other thing is the issue of availability, the issue of open source, open data. We need to have that. Everybody should have access to data, to whatever is put up into the internet without hindrance of paying. This is one of the things which I really think we need to work around.
Thank you for joining today. Minister Twafirayezu.
All right. Thank you very much for giving us an opportunity again. I think the quickest thing I can think of right now is to put in place the right policy frameworks. And this is to ensure that we are not scattered as we try to implement digital solutions in our schools. Because fortunately, we are now getting more and more private sector getting involved in developing content, developing solutions. But sometimes we find ourselves in a situation where there is no framework for us to tap into those resources in a more efficient way. And this results into one education system with 100 solutions, different types of content. So I think we need to figure out a way to build proper policy frameworks that can even guide the private sector on how it can integrate in our education system. And this is, again, to ensure that we have the appropriate content, but also to ensure that most of our kids are reached, that these solutions are not too expensive, to make sure that these solutions are not too fragmented. So I think that policy framework on a country level, but also learning from each other on the continent, I think it will be useful.
Thank you very much for that. And maybe African Union Year of Education gives us an opportunity to also reflect on that question next year, year 2024. Minister Siakalima.
Yes, thank you again for the opportunity. Yeah, what we are trying to do also now, because as we roll out technology to many schools, we also appreciate that not all the teachers are tuned to technology. So we want to do a fast pace to train up more than 100,000 teachers, so that as we roll out, especially in rural areas, they must go and do something that is they are managing. Because sometimes you can have a teacher who a pupil knows better than a teacher. Okay, so we must scale up, and this is what we are trying to do now. And for your own information, our recruitment of last year, the 30,496, many people say, how did you make it? We used actual technology to do that. We rolled out in all the districts, 116 districts. So technology helped us. We just programmed. If you're a teacher, you have applied, if you have a certificate, the grade that you have, the DBAS would refuse. You are not accepted. You are not accepted. You are not accepted. Because it was inbuilt. So it was a fair way of doing it, because in all the districts we did the same. And many people were actually very shocked that sometimes whenever they were recruiting teachers, even if it was by 5,000, it was problematic. By this time around, every teacher who was recruited, they know that they didn't need to go and, if you like, give something in order for them to be recruited. We just did that, and everybody was shocked to say that, how did you make it? They said, no, we programmed it so that everybody has equal chance of being a teacher. So when we do that, as we roll out with the teachers now, they will know that this thing works. So I think that was a plus which we had ourselves. You can imagine 30,496. If they were done manually, you can have somebody, he failed this subject, but he's going to teach. So we are saying that anybody who, even if they have a certificate, but if they did not pass English, for example, or mathematics, how are they going to teach mathematics at grade 5? So we programmed it that way that if you have failed this, automatically it will remove you. So there was very little human element inside there. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It was a real pleasure to have you in this panel, bringing the reflections of Africa to the global launch. I think you raised very important questions. You reminded that education has many challenges, but technology can be a tool, and that's a key. But a tool that has to be on our terms. And I think in your different ways, you elaborate that on the terms of the government, what suits the government, on the terms of the learner, and on the terms of the teacher, because if the teachers are also not brought on board, how is it possible? And I think we all hope to see that the learners get ahead of the teachers in everything, not just in their knowledge of technology, but in all their skills and capabilities to see a better future for our countries. Thank you so much for joining the global launch of the 2023 GEM report.